First, I want to thank Roger for his very kind words, for the friendship that to my family, which has been such a blessing for all of us, and for the extraordinary work that he has done throughout his life on behalf of the Jewish people and on behalf of America. I want to thank my dear friend Eric Cohn for his incredible vision, and my friend Dr. Jonathan Silver for all that he has done to make today possible. And in briefly prefacing my remarks with prayer, I want to echo Dr. Silver's own exquisite words in his reference to yesterday's terrible event. John cited Washington's letter to American Jewry and his statement and prayer that may the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. To this, I would only add Washington's concluding words in this letter. He writes, "May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness upon our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and in his own due time and way, everlastingly happy. Amen." It was in Naples, Italy, in 1944, that an unusual Passover celebration took place, with a remarkable guest, featuring what I call the greatest Dvar Torah ever given by a Christian at a Pesach Seder. 150 Jewish GIs, bogged down in battle in southern Europe, gathered together to mark the Festival of Freedom. And they invited Lieutenant General Mark W. Clark, commander of the United States Fifth Army, to address them. General Clark spoke about the matzah, hurriedly baked by biblical Israel, as it journeyed in freedom into the wilderness. "Tonight," General Clark said, "you are eating unleavened bread just as your forebears ate unleavened bread. Because the exodus came so quickly, the dough had no time to rise. There was," said General Clark, "a time of unleavened bread in this war, the time when it looked as though we might not have time to rise, time to raise an army and equip it, time to stop the onrush of a Germany that had already risen. But the bread," he said, "has begun to rise. It started at Alamein. It was rising higher when the Fifth Army invaded Italy. It is reaching the top of the pan, and soon," he concluded, "the time will come when it will spread out, and the victory will be ours." That is General Clark's Dvar Torah. Yeah. All of you are thinking, note to self, steal this Dvar Torah for the Seder. Now, this Dvar Torah is so striking and apt. In 1776, a committee of Franklin, Jefferson, and Adams recommended that the seal of the nascent United States should feature Moses and Pharaoh at the Red Sea with an accompanying motto that referenced not the colony's liberation, but something much more universal in nature. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Almost 2 centuries later, General Clark emphasized that America continues to seek inspiration from biblical Israel's own tale, and that, like biblical Israel, America's own story will change the world. The Dvar Torah of General Clark reflects something that an observant outsider, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, has noted about America. "Civil religion," he wrote, "has the same relationship to the United States as Pesach does to the Jewish people. It is, first and foremost, not a philosophy, but a story. It tells of how a persecuted group escaped from the old world and made a hazardous journey to an unknown land, there to construct a new society conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Like the Pesach story, it defines the nation, not merely in terms of its past, but also as a moral, spiritual commitment to the future. Thus, it was no accident, as Rabbi Sachs continued, that the founders of America turned to the Hebrew Bible, nor that successive presidents have done likewise, because there is no other text in Western literature that draws these themes, history, providence, covenant responsibility, the need to fight for freedom in every generation, together in a vision that is at once political and spiritual. Israel, Rabbi Sachs concluded, Israel, ancient and modern, and the United States are the two supreme examples of societies constructed in conscious pursuit of an idea. This identification with biblical Israel is the foundation of the uniqueness of America and of the American Jewish experience. In her biography of Sandy Koufax, Jane Levy describes Koufax's famous refusal to pitch for the Dodgers in the first game of the World Series because it fell out on Yom Kippur. Coach Walter Alston chose the great Don Drysdale to pitch in Koufax's stead, and the Dodgers got hammered. The score was 7-1 when Alston came to the mound to take Drysdale out of the game. "Hey, Skip," Drysdale joked, "bet you wish I was Jewish today too." For Jews, Levy writes, this loss was a win. If Big D could joke about being one of the chosen people, that was already something, a tacit acknowledgement of their acceptance into the mainstream. Shtetl, farewell. But the truth is that one of the most marvelous and miraculous aspects of American life is that America's founders and greatest figures identified deeply with the story of the chosen people and saw our story as a model for America. And unlike Drysdale, they meant it in all seriousness. Perhaps the most striking example of this phenomenon is Lincoln, who recalled learning as a child about the American Revolution. I recollect thinking then, he said, boy, even though I was, that there must have been something more that those men struggled for. That's something even more than national independence. That's something that held out a great promise to all the people of the world for all time to come. And, he continued, I am exceedingly anxious that this union, the Constitution, and the liberties of the people shall be perpetuated in accordance with the original idea for which that struggle was made. And I shall be most happy indeed if I shall be a humble instrument in the hands of the Almighty and of this his almost chosen people for perpetuating the object of that great struggle. Almost chosen people. It is a perfect phrase. What it means is that America is not biblical Israel's replacement. It does not seek to supersede or supplant the Jews. Rather, it is biblical Israel's imitator, learning the lessons of Israel's story. If the Jews found a remarkable home in America, it is because America from its beginning found the Jews a remarkable and inspirational people. And if America became modern Israel's best friend, it is because America saw therein a parallel to its own history. All of this should inspire within us enormous gratitude. After all, gratitude lies at the heart of Jewish identity. Rabbi Joseph Soloveichik has noted that the root of the word Yehudi is hoda'ah, which means thanksgiving. However, he further pointed out, the Hebrew word hoda'ah also means confession, because in every true expression of gratitude, there is a confession that we had no expectation of the enormous good that we have received. Given our past 2,000 years, is this not applicable to the American Jewish experience? There is a reason that the great theologian Yogi Berra, when informed that the mayor of Dublin, Ireland was Jewish, insightfully remarked, "The mayor of Dublin is Jewish only in America." He was a genius. America's founders and greatest leaders embraced Jewish ideas and the Jewish people in a manner far beyond what we might have had any reason to expect. It is a phenomenon unlike any other in our diaspora history. And no matter how religiously observant one may be, every American Jew should recognize the role that biblical religion has played in shaping the American character, and that America's connection to biblical Israel has been morally and politically indispensable to making America such a welcome home for the Jewish people. The result of this recognition should be gratitude, a gratitude that engenders an obligation to respect and to protect biblically inspired faith in American society and public life. Here, however, is the tragic truth. Over the past decades, many Jewish organizations and their leaders have done the opposite. They have sought to eliminate all elements of public civic religion in America. They have fought against any governmental assistance to faith communities in America. And they have even recently supported the previous administration's assault on the religious liberties of Christian businesses, schools, and hospitals that have been such a defining feature of America. As Elliot Abrams put it, in the past decades, many American Jewish organizations have seen religion not as the guarantor of civic virtue, but as the source of civic strife and danger for Jews. From the original Jewish insistence that Judaism should be treated with respect, their position, he writes, presently stands revealed not merely as fear of government support for religion, but fear of religion itself. But one need not be an observant Jew to understand that seeking such an America cannot be good for America or for the Jews in America. It is not good for America because, to paraphrase Yuval Levin, religious institutions are essential to freedom. They command us to a mixture of responsibility and righteousness that align our wants with our duties. They are foundational to freedom, not only because they counteract freedom's vices, but because they prepare human beings to handle the responsibilities of being free. And at the same time, hostility to American religion is not good for the Jews, because an unbiblical America ceases to be a country that approaches the Jewish people with the same extraordinary sympathy that characterized America's founders and many of its greatest leaders. Few episodes capture all this as aptly as one sad moment during the Democratic National Convention in 2012, where any mention of God and of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel had been deliberately removed from the platform, as an attempt was made from the dais to put both God and Jerusalem back in the text. The convention hall erupted in boos, booing God and Jerusalem. The removal of God is followed by the booing of God. The eliding of a Jewish Jerusalem is followed by the jeering of a Jewish Jerusalem. And that moment reminds us that an America cut off from its biblical roots ceases to be an almost chosen America. For there is a warning in Lincoln's words, in his deliberate description of America as almost chosen. To be the chosen people is to be an eternal people. God has promised that the Jews will endure no matter what it undergoes. This fact of Jewish history was given succinct and eloquent expression by my hero Menachem Begin when he was told by Jimmy Carter that he, as Israel's prime minister, faced Israel's last chance to make peace. And Begin replied, "Our people lived thousands of years before Camp David and will live thousands of years after Camp David." There are, Begin said, no last chances in the lives of the Jews. That is what it means to be chosen. But America is not chosen. It is, as Lincoln said, almost chosen, which means it can lose its exceptional nature, and it can cease to be what it has always been. It can become something else entirely. And the example of much of Europe, where Israel is denounced daily and Jews are afraid to wear a kippah in the street, is a warning of what a Western country can become. At the same time, in this very moment, there are millions of biblically minded Christians in America who seek assurance and even leadership from American Jews, from members of a chosen people that have endured last chance after last chance. These Christians remain inspired by us, by our own Jewish story. Several years ago, a Christian lawyer, struck by the growing sentiment among traditional Christians that they are living in an unwelcome culture, wrote me a letter saying, quote, "What I'd love to have happen is for a devout Jew to write an article saying, 'To my Christian friends, welcome to my world.' The idea of the article," he wrote, "would be to provide a little older brother wisdom. Religious Jews," my friend wrote to me, "are, quote, a great example of remaining true to principle and belief under both the most extreme and most subtle forms of opposition. And this," he continued, "could inspire Christians to stand for their own principles as well." This is a moment when Jewish conservatives can actually take the lead in renewing the American project, to fight for our religious freedom, but also for that of others, to make it ever easier for people of faith to educate their children, to create communities of faith that inspire America today as ancient Israel once inspired our founders. We can take the lead in articulating a biblically inspired vision of the American idea and explaining how the covenantal vision can serve as the basis for our nation's own political order. And we must remember that in preserving what is best about America, we do so not only for this country, but for humanity. For while America is a nation, it is an exceptional nation with a unique role in the world. As General Clark reminded us on that Seder night in Naples, the founders of the almost chosen nation fought, as Lincoln said, for something more than national independence, for something that held out a great promise to all the people of the world for all time to come. In the end, the metaphorical bread of General Clark's Dvar Torah did indeed reach the top of the pan. The Allied forces emerged victorious, and upon the liberation of Europe, several rabbis and Jewish scholars asked the leaders of the American armed forces for help in publishing copies of the Talmud so that Jews in DP camps could once again study the books that they loved so much. One might have expected the army to refuse this request. After all, their job was to defeat the Nazis and secure peace, not to go into the Jewish book business. Today, even contemplating this action would be denounced by many as an unconstitutional melding of synagogue and state. Yet amazingly, the army agreed, believing that the preservation of Jewish civilization against totalitarian forces of evil was an essential embodiment of the American way. And so the army requisitioned a printing plant in Heidelberg, which during the war had printed Nazi propaganda, and in 1948 it published 500 sets of what is today known as the US Army Talmud, which is the only time in the history of the Jews that a national government published an edition of our oral law. Ladies and gentlemen, can any experience in our exile compare to our encounter with America? I own a volume of this Talmud, and its preface contains the book's only words in English, which is one of the most remarkable expressions of Jewish gratitude that I have ever seen. It says, "This edition of the Talmud is dedicated to the United States Army. The Army played a major role in the rescue of the Jewish people from total annihilation. This special edition of the Talmud, published in the very land where, but a short time ago, everything Jewish and of Jewish inspiration was anathema, will remain a symbol of the indestructibility of the Torah. The Jewish DPs," says the preface, "will never forget the generous impulses and the unprecedented humanitarianism of the American forces, to whom they owe so much." They do indeed owe so much. But no less a debt of gratitude is owed by all of us to America, and with that gratitude comes obligation. Centuries from now, historians studying the American Jewish community will surely be struck by how much, in terms of wealth, power, and civic comfort, this community achieved under conditions of unprecedented freedom. But the historians will also ask, what did American Jews do for America? When so many American Christians devoted themselves wholeheartedly to the well-being of the Jewish state, did Jews return the favor by supporting and fortifying their struggle to withstand a culture that has become hostile to their values? America, at its founding and its finest moments, saw itself as an almost chosen nation. Did Jews work to preserve and sustain the vision of its founders and greatest leaders? And did we help ensure that America remained a model of righteous liberty for all the world? If the answer to these questions is yes, then the project of Jewish conservatism that has inspired this remarkable gathering and this nascent movement will have succeeded. As Jews and as Americans, we find our mandate, our mission, in our greatest president's wise words. I am exceedingly anxious that this union, the Constitution, and the liberties of the people shall be perpetuated in accordance with the original idea for which that struggle was made, and I shall be most happy if I shall be a humble instrument in the hands of the Almighty and of this his almost chosen people for perpetuating the object of that great struggle. So may it be said by each of us. Thank you for having me.